Picture this: a woman clothed with the sun, the moon at her feet, crowned with stars, a great red dragon waiting to devour the newborn child, angels clashing in heaven, a desperate flight into the wilderness. This isn't some sort of cosmic pageantry. It's a story of the ancient past, the present suffering of God's people, and the final crisis of history, all in one dramatic picture. Revelation 12 is small, only 17 verses, but it's dense. In this episode, we will pack it carefully, verse by verse, image by image, so the symbols stop being just mysterious artifacts to you. Open your Bible if you can. Before examining the imagery, we must ask, why does John show this sign now? He interrupts the sequence of judgments and heavenly worship to show the spiritual backstory behind the events we've been reading. Revelation is apocalyptic literature, the same family of writing as Daniel and parts of Ezekiel and Zechariah. Revelation 12 sits like a lens between the seals, trumpets, and the beasts that follow. It explains why persecution happens, cosmic hostility against God's plan personified in the dragon. A helpful way to read the chapter is to see it as the origin story of the persecution we've already encountered. The dragon's rage is not random political cruelty. It's a spiritual assault that has been going on since Eden. And John wants his readers to know that the historical sufferings of God's people has deep meaning and an assured outcome. The woman is a central figure. She gives birth to the child and becomes the target of the dragon's fury. Interpreters have proposed several options: Israel, the church, Mary, or a multi-layered typology. Each option captures truth. None by itself exhausts the image. Textual clues push us towards a composite reading. She is clothed with the sun, the moon under her feet, and a crown of 12 stars. Revelation 12, verse 1. Joseph's dream in Genesis 37 uses similar imagery: sun, moon, and 11 stars bowing, which Joseph later interpreted as his family. The crown of 12 stars naturally invokes Israel's 12 tribes. She gives birth to a male child who will rule the nations with a rod of iron. Revelation 12:5. This echoes Psalm 2, a messianic psalm that points to the child as the Messiah, and thus the woman as Israel, the mother of the Messiah in redemptive history. She is then persecuted, flees into the wilderness for 1,260 days, a tangible time that aligns with Daniel's tribulation motifs and suggests a national remnant finding refuge. So Israel fits naturally as a primary referent. The woman is the covenant people through whom the Messiah comes. But John's symbolism isn't one-layered. The New Testament often expands Israel into the people of God more broadly. The church shares the covenant promises. See Romans 9 through 11 and Galatians 3. Revelation elsewhere uses both Israel and the church language interchangeably at times. And given that the woman's offspring include faithful believers who keep the commandments of God and hold to the testimony of Jesus, Revelation 12, verse 17, the image extends to the people of God in a broader sense. Finally, the woman's birthing of the child also has the immediate historical fulfillment in Mary. Luke's nativity narrative, Luke 1 through 2, is present in John's theological imagination. So many commentators, from the church fathers to modern scholars like J.K. Beale and Richard Bauckham, prefer a typological reading. The woman is Israel, embodied at the incarnation by Mary and now by the believing remnant. The woman can be read on multiple levels without contradiction. She is Israel, the covenant mother; Mary, the historical carrier of the child; the church remnant, the continuing people who suffer for the Messiah. John's point is not to pin a single identity, but to show continuity in God's plan. The child is the most straightforward figure, the Messiah. Revelation 12:5 says, "He will rule all nations with a rod of iron," which deliberately speaks about Psalm 2, verse 9, and Revelation 19:15, passages that the New Testament applies to Christ. Verse 5 says, "The child is caught up to God and his throne." This recalls Christ's ascension and vindication. But the chapter does something the Gospels don't emphasize as clearly. It shows that the dragon tries to stop God's plan from the outset. The dragon's tail sweeps a third of the stars from the sky and casts them to earth, Revelation 12:4. This is a picture of rebellion, and his immediate attempt to devour the child shows how deep the hostility is. Historically, we remember Herod's massacre, but Revelation frames that violence as the continuation of the hostility in Eden. Satan wants to abort God's redemptive work by all means. The summary of this is that the Messiah will be born and vindicated. The dragon's primary strategy, unable to destroy the child, turns to persecuting the mother and her offspring. In short, Christ wins, but persecution continues. That creates the pattern of the book: triumph through apparent loss. John doesn't leave us guessing. He names the dragon explicitly, that ancient serpent who is called the devil and Satan, the deceiver of the whole world, Revelation 12, verse 9. The dragon is the cosmic adversary, the same figure who tempted Eve, accused Job, and prowls around like a roaring lion. Key symbolic elements to examine: 7 heads and 10 horns, Revelation 12:3. Numbers in apocalyptic language signals completeness and power. 7 often denotes fullness. 10 hints at political applications, strength, authority. The imagery signals a political religious system of concentrated power. 7 diadems, crowns on the heads. Imperial authority. The dragon claims kingship. Red color, the blood and warfare. Revelation's color motifs matter. Strategy of the dragon. Revelation outlines a 3-pronged approach. Prevent birth, attempt to devour the child. Eliminate the Messiah's arrival if possible. Persecute the mother. She flees and is pursued. Attack the people of God. Persecute the offspring, those who keep God's commandments. Attempt to obliterate the faithful. This strategy appears consistently in Scripture. When God's plan advances, evil attacks people rather than God. Scholars like G.K. Beale emphasize the dragon's continuity with Old Testament tyrants. In verses 7 through 9, Revelation gives us a lightning scene. Michael and his angels fight the dragon and his angels, and the dragon is defeated and thrown down to earth. This brief vignette carries enormous theological weight. Who is Michael? In Jewish apocalyptic tradition, Michael is the angelic protector of Israel, a warrior figure. His appearance in Revelation ties John firmly to Jewish apocalyptic roots while asserting that God's people have heavenly defenders. What happens in this war? The dragon is cast down, and a heavenly voice proclaims victory. Now, salvation and strength and the kingdom of our God and the power of his Christ have come. Revelation 12, verse 10. The triumph is decisive. Satan is defeated in heaven. But here's the paradox. John highlights the dragon's defeat in heaven increases his fury on earth. Revelation 12:12. The logic is devastatingly simple. If you lose your heavenly influence, you redouble your earthly assaults. This paradox helps us interpret contemporary spikes in persecution. Sometimes increasing hostility against faith is not evidence of God's absence, but an indicator of Satan's backlash as his defeat draws near. The woman's flight, wilderness, refuge, and the Old Testament echoes Revelation 12:6 and 12:14. The woman flees into the wilderness, where God prepares a place for her for 1,260 days. The wilderness motif is saturated with biblical memory. Exodus, Israel's wilderness experience was a season of testing and divine provision. Elijah, the prophet, is fed by angels and sheltered in the wilderness. David, the wilderness becomes a place of protection before the throne. Some futurist interpreters propose a literal refuge, Petra, a fortress city with ancient caves, as a candidate where the Jewish remnant could be protected. Modern commentators such as Joel Richardson and some dispensational teachers have popularized Petra as a plausible physical refuge. That's a speculative but interesting proposal. A more hermeneutically cautious take reads the wilderness primarily as theological symbolism, a place of separation from corrupt systems of the world and a sphere of God's sustaining provision in persecution. The point isn't primarily geography. It is God preserves a remnant, whether through literal caves or spiritual shelter God provides. The time frame, 1,260 days, ties the woman's refuge to the tripartite temporal language of apocalyptic literature that we'll unpack next. Numbers matter in apocalyptic writing. Revelation uses three recurring ways to denote a period of intense testing. 1,260 days, Revelation 11 verse 3 and 12 verse 6. 42 months, Revelation 11 verse 2. Times, and half a time, Daniel 7:25, Revelation 12:14 corresponds. These expressions are equivalent and point to 3.5 years, the half-week motif in Daniel's 70 days. Interpretations divide into two main camps. Literal chronological reading, the tribulation is a 7-year period with a distinct midpoint where persecution intensifies. The woman's 1,260 days fit that model. Symbolic reading, the number 3.5 symbolizes a period of incompleteness, severe but limited testing. The precise number signals this suffering is real but not endless. Both readings aim at the same truth. God controls history and limits evil's power. Revelation 12, verses 15 through 16, describes a frightening scene. The dragon spews a river of water to sweep the woman away, but the earth helps by opening its mouth and swallowing the flood. What does this mean? Interpretations? The river as persecution. Many read it as symbolic of the dragon's attempts to use political, military, and social forces to destroy God's people. The earth's intervention. God can redirect and limit evil's powers, sometimes using nature, even the earth itself, to protect the faithful. This episode highlights God's sovereignty over both supernatural and natural realms. The dragon's arsenal is vast, but God's provision is sure. The passage also shows divine ingenuity. When enemies raise their forces, God can intervene in surprising ways. Revelation 12 ends with a chilling and hopeful note. The dragon goes off to wage war with the rest of the woman's offspring, those who keep God's commandments and hold to the testimony of Jesus. Revelation 12, verse 17. The term offspring, Greek sperma, is the same root used of the Messiah's seed. Now it extends to those who share Christ's witness. This is crucial. The story moves from corporate Israel to the remnant of all the faithful, Jews and Gentiles, who remain loyal under persecution. The martyrs, the faithful 144,000, and the confessing church all fall under this category. Revelation's theology is mercifully inclusive. The church participates in Israel's story. God's redemptive plan spans both. God preserves a remnant. Even when numbers dwindle, the faithfulness of that remnant is decisive for God's purposes. Revelation 12 gives us the spiritual map. The Messiah is born and vindicated. Satan is cast down. Persecution intensifies. God protects a remnant. It is both a theological reassurance and a pastoral wake-up call. The chapter prepares us for what follows: beasts, the mark, Babylon's seductions, the great fall, and finally, the return of the king. Next episode, we'll move from Revelation 12 into the human systems that take up the dragon's tactics. Mystery, Babylon, and the global order that seduces and exploits. We'll trace how religious, political, and economic powers converge into a single seductive and deadly system. Until then, read Revelation 12 again slowly. Let its images settle in your imagination. Let its paradox, victory in suffering, strengthen your courage. This is Divine Mysteries. We don't have all the answers, but we search carefully. This is a great time to subscribe and share this video with someone who needs to see it. See you in the next episode.